Good afternoon. I trust
Okay.
everyone's here. Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Thank-
Chief Murphy is the only one I see. Jay.
Let's figure when we get Daisy, when we get to that part, which I think might be first anyway, we'll discuss that out and make sure.
I
Mr.
think
Chairman,
I think Daisy is on, right? I think I see her.
Yes,
she is on here, Mr. Chairman, and she told me when I came on that they were half through. They told me Mountain Time, and I think they gave you Pacific Time to come on the meeting so they could try to get work done. They wanted to get work done before you and I came on for some reason.
All right. All right. Let us go ahead and get started. Thanks for all of you for showing up today. And Jay, thanks for scheduling the miracle of scheduling all these committee meetings. These are select committee meetings of the Hamilton County Emergency Communications District 911. We will be hearing today from the Facilities Committee, the Technology Committee, and our Executive Committee on select agenda items. This meeting has been duly advertised pursuant to the laws of the state of Tennessee. And we're holding this meeting electronically also pursuant to the provisions of state law. Given that we're using Zoom technology, all votes that we take today shall be by voice vote. We will say that to Executive Director Jeff Carney to make sure of that. Please check your technology and make sure that you are connected and can manage a voice vote. Again, this is select committees. We will start now with the Facilities Operations Committee, the chair of that committee for the agenda for facilities and operation.
And Mr. Chair, can I tell you something real quick? I meant to brief you and the board.
Okay.
Seth and I have determined, we're looking at the agenda, we thought we were going to have to go into an executive session on some of these cybersecurity and facilities things, but we're not going to talk about anything in depth, and all board members need to, we don't want to discuss anything critical, and so we will just stay on. We won't have to do that. This is all pretty mundane things we're going to talk. If you do have any specific questions, get with Jeff or about them, but go ahead, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you, Eddie, for that. We don't have to go in executive session for that. Again, we will also be talking to the executive committee on this call as well for select items that deal with the personnel committee and HR related issues. Let's go with the facilities committee now, that agenda.
Yes, sir. Chief Hyman, you may just take it and run with it.
Run with it.
Thanks, Chief.
First on the agenda are the bollards on Wisdom Street. As part of the risk management survey, bollards were recommended to protect the turnstile here behind me, the utility pole that's also right behind me, and the transformer. Billingsley Architecture drew up those plans, advertised, and gave us a recommendation on this project. We're installing 11 bollards to protect all those items I mentioned. Sealed bids were solicited in December. A mandatory pre-bid was held in January, and then bids were opened on January 18th with 2 vendors responding. We had Thomas Brothers with a response of $48,950 and Robert Roberts with a response of $82,800. Billingsley Architecture reviewed the bids. He said the vast difference in those bids was apparently Robert Roberts is planning to sublet this contract, whereas Thomas Brothers is using their own personnel and their own equipment. Billingsley said the bids were good to him and recommends Thomas Brothers in the low bid amount of $48,950. We recommend approval of this. It's included in the capital budget as building security improvements, and the annual depreciation would be $2447 for 20 years, $2,447.
Jeff, thank you for that. Chief Hyman, any comments about that?
No, I'd recommend approval for that as well. Jeff's done a really good job researching all that, and Billingsley's definitely worked with us to get us to that point.
All right, and I assume, Jeff, there are safety provisions there that when they dig in the ground, they've marked that and making sure they don't get anything, right?
Correct, sir. We've already had the geo survey done. Everything's
Okay.
marked out there, so we're ready to go.
Good to go. Chief, will you make that a motion?
I will make that a motion to approve the bollards.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second by Chief Mitchell there. Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
But a point of order, we're approving this to go to the full board. March
That is
9th.
correct. That is correct. That is correct. All right. Any other members of the Facilities Committee? There's been a motion and second. All those in favor, members of the Facilities Committee, as well as the Executive Committee, you can vote on this as well. Let's do a roll call if you would, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Chris Adams,
Yes.
Richard Brown,
Yes.
Austin's not here. Daisy Madison,
Yes.
Chief Murphy, Eddie Phillips,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
Chief Hyman.
Yes.
All right, this matter will go to the full board. Thank you, Jeff. Good work. We're delighted that we're moving that forward. Next item.
If you'll recall, I talked to you about console heaters, where we had a fire in one of the heaters. We've got 41 consoles down there. We've replaced 2 heaters so far, and we now have 4 that are out of service with replacement needed. With those 4 being out of service, that's a total of 6, plus the one that caught fire. They're 12 years old. We felt that due to the age, wear and tear on these units, and to prevent any other catastrophe down there, that we would replace 39 of those units. These units are unique to the console manufacturer, and they're not interchangeable with others because of the console manufacturer we use, which is Russ Bassett. So we obtained a quote and submitted the sole source documentation in your packet. This includes installation so that we can maintain the warranty coverage through Russ Bassett. The total for the purchase, shipping, and installation is $61,105. We would ask for an amendment to the capital budget in that amount. If approved, the annual depreciation would be $6,110 and 50 cents for 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for that. Phil, if you would, any comments?
No comments. I'd move approval to move to the full board.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll seek a second to that motion. Is there a second? Go to move this to the full board.
Adam second.
Adam second. Okay. Any further comment? Daisy, I'll ask you about the sole source, and Mike, it sounds like we're fine with that, but just always like to kind of get that on the record.
Yeah, when I read the documents, based on the explanation given, it seems like it is to me.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you all right legally?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any further comment? Jeff, roll call, please.
Chris Adams,
Yes.
Richard Brown,
Yes.
Daisy Madison,
Yes.
Eddie Phillips,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
Chief Hyman.
Yes.
All right, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. We will move that matter to the full board. All right, anything else?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
The UPS maintenance, and I may tag Seth in on this. The UPS obviously is important to our power distribution. They're currently covered under a 5-year contract directly with the manufacturer, which is Vertiv. This is paid annually. The contract expires on July 1st and must be renewed. They've given us a proposal for a new 5-year contract with an annual payment of $25,574.58. This is an increase of $8,023 over the previous amount. The current contract was from 2018 to 2023. If approved, the new contract would be 2024 to 2029. We believe that we need to stay with Vertiv as they're the original equipment manufacturer and the experts on the equipment. They're the only authorized service providers for this equipment. And they have the parts on hand and make sure that we always have parts in case something goes down on this critical system. The ask here is for the continued use of Vertiv as the UPS maintenance provider. And if approved, then the cost of that contract would be in the 24 budget. So there's no money to spend at this time. It's just we're asking to continue to use that service.
Okay, let me hear from Phil, if you would. Any comments on that?
No comments. Once again, I'd like to make a motion to move it to the full board for approval.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Adam second.
Chief Adams second, okay. Let's open up for discussion now. From a legal standpoint, Mike, are we okay to move in this direction? I'll move to
Yes, sir.
Daisy too.
Yes, sir.
Daisy, your perspective?
Yes, I was trying to keep up and read at the same time, but yes, I'm good.
Okay, it looks like this is a critical piece of equipment and they do have the ability to service this equipment, given they were the original installers, Jeff, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any further comments or concerns? Roll call, please.
Chris Adams,
Yes.
Richard Brown,
Yes.
Daisy Madison,
Yes,
Eddie Phillips,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
and Chief Hyman.
Yes.
Thank you for that. All right.
One more item for facilities, just to give you an update on the projects. Chief Hyman, myself and staff met with Billingsley on February 2nd to go over the list of action items that were created from the risk management study. We asked Billingsley to produce an RFP for the blast bulletproof windows for all first floor rooms on the Wisdom Street side, to provide an updated quote for anti-climb fencing around most of the building perimeter, to include access controls for entry and exit. Once we get that, then we'll have to meet with CPD to review and talk about budget. We met with them again on February 16th with March Adams engineers on the recommendation for air quality monitoring and protection of air intake from toxic events. Excuse me. And we've asked him to prepare an RFP on that.
Okay. Phil, any further comments? I really appreciate you guys moving these projects forward, and it's imperative though that we make sure that the city is at the table when we are talking about fencing and all of that access controls and all.
And Jeff and I have both talked about that, getting Chief Murphy involved in the next steps, and we'll do that in the coming days. But Jeff, Seth, and Jay did a really good job in this meeting, talking to Billingsley and getting a lot of that information done. So I'd like to make a motion to move it to the full board.
Okay,
may I?
go
comment?
ahead. Go ahead, Daisy.
With respect to making sure that both entities are covered, I don't know the extent to which this change will happen, but probably it's not a bad idea, maybe in a staff meeting or something, to let the mayor and the administration know that you're about to do something like that. Whatever it is.
That's a good thought, and I think once we kind of narrow down what we're trying to do, we should inform them, Chief, both you and Chief Murphy, to
Okay.
get them at the table.
You know, Mr. Chair and Phil, talking about the fencing, these other things are kind of routine, but as we get to the fencing, which we would like to see go around the whole property, of course, the city needs to be at the table at it because we're putting it around their property, you know. But two questions. One is, are we also talking about those gates and making sally ports, or is that going to be a separate issue?
Jeff, you want to touch on the specifics?
I think what we're looking at is to have some designated as entrance only, some designated as exit only. And the recommendation right now is for tire spikes to prevent, you know, if somebody's going out, to prevent someone from barging in, to have tire spikes preventing that. And that's one of those things that we really need to talk to Chief Murphy about, because, you know, it's the police officers that are mostly going in and out of the parking lot. We've got very few back there, but and we
Also-
certainly don't want to inhibit any police officers getting off the lot either.
You're also, so Billingsley's working that, that's all part of this package. It's not just fencing.
Correct. Yeah, we included the entrance exit controls on that.
Why don't we say today that we'll allow you to continue that planning and to move that forward? We won't vote on anything. We don't know numbers and anything definitive right now. So we'll say continue the planning and moving that forward and get us a proposal for the board to consider. Is that okay, Chief Hyman?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
Other
big
comment?
project.
Mr. Chair, also, possibly when they have all this together and the city, you know, and don't talk money with the city yet is what I'm trying to say. I think we had discussed, and this will be something, maybe I'll need to come back to the board first and we be briefed on the costs and what this is looking like. And the city needs to be at the table to agree. But we had discussed in the past when we were discussing on building a new facility and we didn't really have the money to do that. And the board decided we wanted to harden this facility. We had talked about maybe using board money to do this, either 100% or maybe it's something less than a 50-50, a 75-25 or something. But you're right, like you and Daisy have said, the mayors need to be at in the table on it, and the city needs to, you know, fire police needs to be on the table on it, but then the board too. You know, I just don't want us to get numbers from Billingsley and go talk to the city and they get scared to death because it's going to cost a lot of money. So
Yeah.
maybe we could work that out somehow.
We'll do that. As they move the planning forward and get more definitive, we will plan to have that session, that working session with the leadership. And they can decide then how much they'd like to contribute and that kind of thing. So making sure that we're being fair and equitable to everybody involved. But it's one site. I'm just excited that we're going to unify our planning for the entire site and not just a small portion of it.
Yep.
Okay, any further comments? Phil, thanks for moving that forward. I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to seeing the final plan on that. And Jeff, thank you for your work too of coordinating some of that. Okay, Jeff, anything else from facilities?
No, sir.
You guys had a good, healthy agenda. We appreciate that, and the board will certainly consider those items. Let's move now to the Technology Committee. Chair?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give this to Seth to explain, and then I have a couple of items I need to talk to the board about with it. But Seth, go ahead, brother.
On my agenda up here. Cooperating. So in a nutshell, we have our current antivirus system, which is everyone calls endpoint protection now, but it's basically antivirus. We purchased that 3 years ago from a company called Sophos. That 3-year agreement runs out the end of March of this year. When we looked at upgrading it, replacing it, you know, all their various options, we came to the conclusion that we needed to move over to a different product that has a lot more features as far as the newer cybersecurity threats that are out there, where Sophos can be lacking. So what we did is we got with Avertium, who does our current cybersecurity monitoring, asked what they currently recommend. They recommend a product called SentinelOne, which if you look at the list of endpoint protection providers, it's right at the top with a couple of other products. So it's very good. So it has a lot of features that we currently don't have with Sophos that will help us tremendously in the event of an attack on our systems. In addition to that, Avertium will have access to the system to be able to help us manage it. If we get stuck with an issue, we can call them. Their experts will help us get through it. So I think it'll be a really good deal for us here. The big difference is it's a lot more expensive. So Sophos we paid $15,600 for 3 years. This is going to cost $35,280 per year. So it's a major increase in cost. If we were to upgrade Sophos to their newer version that has all these additional bells and whistles, the cost would basically be the same as Sentinel-1. So no matter which product we go with, it's going to cost, $35,000 a year, unfortunately. So what we did is Verdium got with Insight, and they have quoted it under the Omnia Partners contract pricing, which we've bought a lot of product from before. They've given us the option to pay part of it this fiscal year and parts next fiscal year to help spread it out. However, with talking with Jay and Jeff, I think our recommendation is going to be just pay the entire thing this fiscal year, as we're coming in under budget currently. So that's our request, is to approve it for $35,280 in this current fiscal year. Then next year we'll budget that same amount to renew it ongoing.
All right, Seth, thank you for that background. Eddie, we'll get your comments, but my initial thoughts are, is this something that's biddable for us?
Well, it would be biddable, but they put it on this thing that's like the state contract, and it's been bid off that contract. So we are pushing through that loop of really bidding, as long as we do it on this approved, gosh, I can't remember the word, but it's cooperative purchasing, through this bid. So that's a good point, Ms. Chair. It kind of is biddable, but doing it this way, it's like doing it on state bid, and it has been bid.
I'm going to yield kind of to Daisy, our treasurer, too, to kind of get her thoughts on this too.
Actually, there again, as I was reading through the documents, I'm hanging my position on the notion that this is sort of like a pool contract that's already been bid, that qualifies as a contract under which the city the 911 can participate, sort of like other state reports.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. Yes, it is. And we have used this contract on many other purchases. We've already, it's been a while, so the board may not remember this, but we've had this topic has been looked at, and Mike has approved it, and it is in the state of Tennessee an approved group purchase, a cooperative purchase, like a state bid.
Yeah.
Let me yield to Mike Mann to talk a little bit about that, because I mean, one of the sticking points for me is what Seth said, that the current company, if they raise their standards to this other company's standards, the cost would be the same. So, but I'll yield to Mike.
Mr. Chairman, it seems appropriate that the way he's doing it is correct.
Right? Any further, go ahead, Eddie.
Seth, explain to us why we would want to go with this new company instead of letting the old company raise their standards up to it.
This company works more directly with Verdium, who does our current cyber monitoring. So to us, it makes sense to have the system that they recommend, that they currently work with. So in the event of an incident, they would know this system a lot better than if we tried to shoehorn a different system in there.
Okay.
Now,
All right, Chairman Phillips, let me go ahead and get a motion on the table to get this to the full board. Would you make that motion, sir?
Before you make the motion,
Go ahead, Daisy.
what's the difference in the price? It's not much, is it? It suggested it was very close.
Correct. If we were to upgrade the current system, it would be, I want to say, a little under 1,000 less per year than this system. So it's basically the same.
Okay, and if I'm correct here, when you use a state contract, the current contract is about to expire anyway, is that correct?
Correct. It expires in the end of March.
Right, and we would have the opportunity to just go blanket on this particular contract regardless, right? We're not canceling the other one.
Correct. Yeah, this one's just going to run out, the existing one. Correct.
Great points. All right. Eddie, would you make a motion to move this to the board?
Yeah, let me ask Mr. Chair, let me ask Mike to explain to us one more time. If we can, sorry guys, my alarm's going off. If we can vote today to do this is a committee meeting, but we have the full board in attendance and it's been an advertised committee meeting. We're wanting to do the full vote now instead of going to the board because this does run out. Our full board meeting is not till March 9th. This runs out March 27th. So I guess we want to know from you, is it legal for the board to vote on this and purchase it today rather than waiting till the full board meeting March 9th?
Mr. Chairman, it's been advertised as a committee meeting, and that would be all that would be allowed. Just to be, can't be taken to full board to miss that. It has to go through the board.
Okay, now Seth, let me ask you. Full board is March the 9th. This runs out March 27th. That's about 2 weeks and 4 days. Will they have time to implement this?
It would be very difficult to do it that quickly.
Okay, then I'll ask the chair, maybe we can call a special call board meeting later this week just to vote on this item. Give us
Yeah,
time
if
to
you would do
advertise.
Eddie, that makes sense. I was thinking along that lines too. Jay, if you'd go ahead and call for an emergency board meeting to get this item done. Cybersecurity and those things are critically important. And I see Seth is saying, yes, he needs the coverage. So let's do that. I promise we won't take much of the board's time. We'll just be done with you probably in less than 15 minutes or so. But we really do need to do that.
Okay.
We need to get this done. Thank you, Eddie, for that.
You're very welcome.
Yes, go ahead, Daisy.
Wasn't this item discussed at the last board meeting?
No.
It wasn't this one?
Was it Seth? I don't think it came up, did it?
We mentioned that it was on the radar, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
It
'cause I
had
remember,
information.
yeah.
I recall him saying it was coming.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's good information that we need to know from Mike, that we can't really vote, we can't take action on committee meetings except push things to the full board.
Yes, sir.
All right, Eddie, so this one's kind of deferred till we can get this
Right.
to the full board. But let's go ahead and go ahead and do a vote now to say we want to put it to the full board. Make a motion, Eddie.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make the motion. We push this to the full board in a emergency call meeting.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chief. All right, roll call, please.
Richard Brown,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
Brad Tucker,
Yes.
Eric Mitchell,
Yes.
Chief Phillips.
Yes.
That's
Thank
the
you.
tech committee.
Right, is that the tech committee? All right.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? All right, we will move now to the executive committee meeting. We have several.
Actually, there's so many different things sent down, but there's actually a personnel committee. I don't know if you want to do that jointly or separately.
Yeah, I have the agenda, but it's under the executive committee meeting.
Is it that
Yeah,
deal
the
about the
proposal, yeah.
cybersecurity? Okay,
Yeah, I'm gonna call Ted to report here in a minute.
okay.
Okay, we go to the executive committee meeting. The first thing we have is client agency cost. We'll yield back to Executive Director Carney for that presentation.
Yes, sir. Let me. See if I can share a screen. And get my notes back. Okay, for client agency cost, I know this is not normally discussed ahead of time, but as the acting director, not the full-time director, we had 3 options, actually 4 options, I guess, to look at that I felt I needed your guidance on, especially when it deals with client agency costs, since that's as we all know, a big deal. I've got them prepared. We've got two factors on this. If you remember when we did the raises last year, rather than put it all on the client agencies at one time, we actually split it in half. So there were deferred costs for the employee raises from 2022. Those were projected at $350,070. Now, on a normal year, Hamilton County gave a 3% raise last year. So we would be looking at a 3% raise this year in FY24. The cost of that 3% raise will be $396,450. So here's the three options I've prepared. If we do the 3% increase only, that's an increase to the client agencies here on this bottom right of $396,450. If we just do the remainder of the amount from 2022, the increase would be $350,000 or $350,000 and 70. If we do 3% plus the remainder of the amount from 2022, it would be $747,520, which is a big hit. My recommendation to the board would be that we do the 3% increase only. I don't really need the 350,000. We paid it last year. We were to the good last year. We didn't draw from reserves. And it's, if I don't give a 3% raise, that would actually be more than what I would need to operate.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Eddie.
Jeff, I'm confused. I thought that we had to, I was going to say before you made your recommendation that we almost had to do the remainder. I mean, that's what we were locked into when we gave the big raises last year. We said we would do it over a 2-year period. So it seems like we were locked into that. And if we don't do it, even though you don't need it right this minute, what'll happen in future years if you don't have it? You know, we've already told the agencies that we were doing this big adjustment and doing it over a 2-year period. If we don't do it, we can't go back to them in later years. See what I mean? And
yes, sir.
I'm just not sure about, explain it to us. I'm just not clear on that.
My cost, for example, on this 3%, this is my cost. If I give a 3% raise, even with the raise that we gave in 2022 still in effect, you know, this $9,014,545 is my cost. So
what happens when you begin to fill vacancies and all that kind of stuff?
This includes all my vacancies, just about. I think I've got a few short that I don't expect to fill that year, so it'll go up slightly, but it's not going to go up $350,000.
Eddie, let me kind of hear from Daisy and Ted, especially Ted on the personnel committee too. Get his thoughts about that, because I do know we want to do some continuing work on compensation planning and benchmarking. We had talked about the potential to liquidate several line item positions and infuse that into a competitive pay plan. Talked a little bit about that, and to get Dr. Gohagan and others to begin to work on that. Let me just kind of get Ted and Daisy's thoughts about this too. Daisy, can we start with you and then Ted?
Oh, well, I would have assumed Ted had more intimate knowledge, but
I'm sorry, Ted, go ahead. Let me go ahead and yield to Ted then. Ted, go ahead.
One question that I would have, Jeff, is, I don't really remember how to say this correctly, but there is a certain percentage of the telecommunicators that all of the client agencies are responsible for funding. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And that's what's reflected here.
Yeah, as when you say that you don't need the funds, I understand that for budget wise, to balance your budget for this coming fiscal year, it looks like. I understand what you're saying there, but my concern is if we don't charge appropriately the client agencies every year for their share of the telecommunicators, I don't want to set a precedent to where we have a year or two that we never charge them the appropriate amount for their appropriate, I hate to keep using that word, but for their share of the cost of the telecommunicators. That's my first concern. My second concern is we do want to make sure that we continually, in this massive inflationary environment, that we make an honest effort to keep up with wages, understanding that at the end of the day, we might not be able to put everything that we possibly can in. So I don't want to get behind. Those are my 2 points. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. I can see it that way as well. It's another reason I brought it before the exec committee. We'll find out if my windows are bulletproof here in a minute, because John Sturmer's probably on the way down here to take me out.
Daisy, your thoughts?
My only concern is I don't want to set that precedent. You know, if it costs X amount of dollars, let me rephrase.
Yeah,
If during the past years, we've always charged all of the client agencies X% of the money required to pay the telecommunicators, I think we need to be consistent with that. And if it causes excess money, then that's an opportunity to do what we need to do. We certainly don't want to overcharge them, but we want to charge them the appropriate amount.
well stated, Ted. Daisy, your thoughts? Put your city downtown Daisy hat on.
No, I'm gonna keep my 911 hat on.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
I appreciate Ted's comments because you want to be able to sustain your salaries. Now, but my base question is, I thought I remembered last year that we decided not to split the cost of the salaries for the employees, but to give it all to them at the same time. Did we not do that?
We did.
Okay, so then that means that the wages here, or the wages that it would be for those employees going forward. Is that correct? The 396? That includes the entire increase for all of the 911 employees, right?
That includes all of the employees that received the raise last year, the new ones at the new rate, plus 3%.
Plus 3%. Okay, so they're getting so the two questions, okay, sort of a different question. The raise that they got last year was not related to the county's pay at that time because we were trying to catch up and we were doing a lot of things. So we did all of those things in an attempt to get people closer to where we needed them to be, and did not try to follow the county. Is that correct? Because if we had followed the county, we would have been we would have paid less wages, correct?
Correct. We ignored the county's FY22 raise as our raise was greater.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to the county for FY24. Okay, now, so with that in mind, going forward, I'm comfortable that the 396 is sustainable with the current budget. My bigger, back to Eddie's comment, however, if you want to go ahead, if we would go ahead and if we paid for the last amount for last year, then I think at one point we decided that the county and the city, the amounts that are here are only estimates. To the extent that we do not use all of that cost, it is to be offset. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, ma'am. It goes back to the client agencies.
Right. So no matter what you put there, if you don't spend it, then it should go back against what you put the count. It should go back to those agencies on a pro rata basis, however that works. Now that 396 should not relate to FY24. It would just be a catch up for FY23. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, 396 is anticipating the cost for FY.
No, I meant the catch-up. The 396 is FY 24.
396 is for FY 24. The 350,
50 is the catch-up.
yes, ma'am.
Right, so the catch-up should be applied against actuals, and to the extent that actual last year was less than or more than was required for the funding that the agencies gave, then you would make an adjustment.
Right.
If it wasn't enough, you'd have to ask for more. If it was less, you would have to ask for, you would have to give them back. Is that making any sense? Ted, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I think that would answer his, Ted's concern about setting a precedent. Yeah.
Daisy, thank you for that. That was my thought too. I was kind of aligned with both you and Ted that given the fact that when I talked to both mayors about this, I did tell them to expect the other balance of that funding. So I think that being consistent and not setting the precedent, we should keep that and move that forward. And like Daisy said, if we have savings, that inures back to the joint agencies anyway. At the end of the day, that's been our policy. The issue for me is the new raise of 3% or what that is. And I don't know if it will be 3 or if it'll be 9 at the end, because I wanted us to do this compensation planning to make sure that we're staying competitive, that we're dealing with inflationary items and that kind of thing. It may be more than 3. I don't know. But I'd like your thoughts about that. Ted?
My thoughts is that, we need to do what we can afford. And
Right.
at the same time, we need to do our very best effort to stay as competitive as possible. And that potentially has additional research. I will put a caveat in there though, is this might be an unpopular statement, but I don't want to spend $100,000 doing research on what the right number would be. I'd rather put that money toward our people. Now, I know we need to get data, don't get me wrong, but I'm hesitant to pour a bunch of money into consultants for anybody to give a whole bunch of research that we could put potentially toward our people in the first place, if that makes sense. So yeah, 3% might not be enough. 3% might be enough. I'm suspicious that 3% won't be enough, which gives rise to the thing that we said earlier, that we make sure that each agency pays their appropriate delegated share, as well as we put any perceived extra amount toward these potential raises, so we don't have to keep raising the rates on the client agencies as much as possible.
Okay.
But I will add one more caveat. I know it's been our plan in the past, and this is something that maybe we need to discuss at another day. But in the past, we just pick an agency. It doesn't matter which one. They paid in $200,000, and we use 180, and we give them back 20. I don't know that that's a standard that we ought to continue. I think we ought to move toward a process where we don't give them back that 20, but we don't charge them the 20 in the next fiscal year. I think that creates a nightmare when we're trying to do budgeting, but that's just a personal observation.
I don't think we get it back. I think they just offset it against next year.
Yeah, that's what I would rather see. I don't want to.
When I say we give it back, you're not refunding money.
We shouldn't refund money. We should just put that in savings so they don't have a bigger increase next year.
That's what happens.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, but you can't necessarily save it per se, because each year has to stand on its own. So there again, the excess from last year, or would that be 23 or whatever year it was, to the extent that it was truly excess dollars, that amount does not get paid.
And it go into reserves, Daisy, and be held and offset the
No,
next.
and this, there again, it would be, it's not offsetting again. It would only offset FY 23 if FY 23 doesn't have enough.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Daisy, I thought you were done.
No, yeah, but the only thing is, the money that we're talking about relates to FY 22 or 23.
23.
Right, so we won't know the extent to which of that amount until FY 23 ends.
Correct.
But
Jeff, you may have provided this already, but what is the figure? Like I said, you may have provided it, but what is the figure if we charge the client agencies what they're supposed to be charged according to the formula, and we add a 3% raise on top of that? Is that the figure you've already given?
Yeah.
What figure is that?
390.
It was the 796.
The-
Yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, it's
Now,
747.
If you can show it on the screen, because when we print it off, it doesn't come out good, so. Yes.
It is 747,000
Yeah.
aggregate.
this amount right here.
Okay, now I'm not understanding then.
That's collecting both the 350,000 that was promised in the 2-year and
Right.
then the additional 3% raise. That's my understanding, Jeff, how you presented that, correct?
Yes, sir. And
Which-
based on the discussion you've had, if it's the desire of the board to give more than the 3% raise, this amount would enable us, just off the top of my head, to give about a 5.5%, 5 to 5.5%. And then we could look further.
I think that's the figure we ought to go with, Jeff. I think we are to charge the client agencies as consistently as we have in the past. Theoretically, look toward budgeting a 3% raise. And in the meantime, if we can get some additional data in, Dr. Gohagan and the executive staff can get some extra information in, that it might be that we need to give a 4 or 5% raise of sorts, if we can get that data.
Now-
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask Ted, are you saying that this, or Jeff possibly, you're saying if we did this, what's on the screen, the 3% plus the remainder that we had told them we were going to do, and then later on, if we determine we want to give a larger than 3% raise, we would use this money to do it, right? Because this is extra. We would have enough money to do it, because I just don't want us to tell the agencies, you know, we're doing this, and then in a month we have to come back and we're going to give a 9% raise or whatever. That was another question, I guess, for Jeff. When does this have to go to the agencies so they can do their planning for their budget?
Last week, really. The county's hit us up twice for it. So
And that's why I think we ought to give them that figure. I think we ought to give them the figure of what we've always done, plus the 3%. And then if we find additional data that we should give 4 or 5, and the money is there to do that, then I think we should do it. But if not, we give at least 3%, but we've charged the agencies what we're supposed to charge them, and we've been consistent.
Right, I agree with that one, because you know what the chair said, he told the mayors, expect this over a 2-year period, we do that, and then we hang our hat on the 3% because that's what the county, you know, we have historically done the next year what the county did the previous year, so this gets us back on track.
And Eddie, if there's an offset, and there may be, Jeff is saying, we may have some savings that might offset that. As Daisy said, we just go back and present that to the mayors and say,
Right.
you got an offset here. It won't cost you that entire 396 or
Right.
whatever. So
But actually, you know what Ted's saying, after we do this study and if we decide we need to give more than 3, Jeff is saying there's extra money in here in this budget, in this 747, there's extra money to do that. And we don't have to go back to the agencies and say, well, we decided to give another raise.
Correct.
So that makes sense.
So what I would ask is, yeah, it makes sense, is that these numbers, that there's 747 and be sort of segregated, and maybe they are already. Because the 747 is not an annual increase.
No,
It's a year and a half.
yes, yes.
And that needs to be pretty much in there. But what's the weird part about it is, these were estimates. If we go to the 350, the one that actually supports the cost, which is the last year's raise as well as the proposed 3%, is an annual cost that's about 3%. So putting those together, it amounts to about a 6%. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Now, but then that's one of those things that you say, you need to make sure we're doing things that are sustainable and that is affordable. And so it sounds like it is or is not. The question becomes, if I were a funding agency, I would just kind of want to know, what kind of change does this $700,000 represent?
Okay.
And then if I'm going retro, then that would be a weird thing to say. I'm paying retro, but I didn't need the money for retro. You gave me enough to fund my last year's wages. It just gets a little tricky, but at the end of the day, at the end of this fiscal year, whatever the cost is, the 300 and was it 350?
Yes, ma'am.
It will be offset for FY 24 based on what that is, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So it's gonna fall out to be where it is.
And Jeff,
Okay.
you told the board, Jeff, that you feel you have funded just about all your positions. You don't see anything that we're not doing that's going to get us in trouble later. We're going to come back and say we don't have enough money.
No,
Uh,
sir.
No, I
No,
would,
sir.
Well, thank you for this discussion on this. We will go to the executive committee now to entertain a motion to move forward the remainder of the 2-year cycle funding at $350,000 and the 3% amount as well, aggregating up to $747,000. It keeps us consistent in our practice with the proviso or caveat, Jeff, that says this may be offset. These costs may be offset and they actually be a little lower. This is a projection. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll entertain a motion from the executive committee now to move this item, Jeff's recommendation, to the full board for both funding items, the 350 and the 396. I believe that's correct. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. For the total of 747,520.
747,520. Can I get a motion to get that on the floor?
I needed, something that tells me that that's a 6% increase, just so that it's easy enough if I get asked the question. And with that, I move that it be approved, that it moved to the full board.
Okay.
It would be close to 6%, Ms. Madison.
Yeah, I would just, I think on this particular case, since it is complicated a little bit, it requires a note. It would help to have a note there when you send that information to Hamilton County, City of Chattanooga.
Well, since the raise hasn't been approved yet, would I just say
It wouldn't have been,
this is
it's the
350 as charged from last year's raise plus
Right.
3%?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because what we're saying, from what I understand, Jeff, what we're saying is we're providing the same consistent standard level of funding plus the county's 3% raise that they gave last year that we're incorporating this year.
Yes, sir.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, and this gets us back on cycle too with the county.
It does, guys, but if you know, whenever you're doing budgets and so forth, it's gonna look $700,000 as opposed to 400,000 that we had maybe, let's say, year before. And so the basic question is why? And that's all. It's because this is more than a year. That's the reason why. It's a very small percentage increase, but it includes 50%. It includes half of last year's raise amount that that we
Yeah.
discussed. That's all it is.
Correct.
All right.
I'll second Daisy's motion.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any further comments? I really do appreciate the insight and the comments by the board. We want to keep our compensation competitive because I think that will help us in recruiting and sustaining our workforce, and that's critical for us. I think Jeff would echo that.
Yes, sir.
Right. All right. A roll call, please, Jeff.
Chief Phillips,
Yes.
Daisy Madison,
Yes,
Ted Rogers,
Yes,
Chairman Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, before we go on, I would like to say, I agree with Ted, our personnel chair, about we don't need to hire a consultant to do this study. I think that if we do want to continue to look at our compensation and compare ourselves to other public safety agencies, between Jeff and Jay and Angel, we have a very sharp staff, and I think they can, given time to do it, they can put that together without having to pay an outside consultant.
can I throw a caveat in on what the vice chairman said? What I meant to say, I need to clarify that, is I understand that we're moving toward a model where we're going to engage Linda. I can't remember her last name.
Mhm.
Herrig. I don't count her as an outside consultant, even though she is, if that
Right.
makes sense. What I'm talking about is hiring a separate firm. I do anticipate, if the board, the executive board agrees, I do anticipate the executive staff, Dr. Gohagan and Linda Herrig to do this analysis. Does that make sense, Eddie? Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
And Ted, I was also thinking the same thing, that we have our own internal capacity with this other consultant that we have working with Dr. Gohagan to get this data done. Historically, the board, though, has used this outside firm because Hamilton County government had used that firm.
Agreed.
We did not have capacity to do it. But the good news is that we do have capacity now, and that's really good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for my clarification.
All right. Any further comments about that? That was very, very important. All right. Proposal for the human resources consultant. We'll yield back to Ted.
Chief Rogers, you're muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
I don't know how that happened. I thought I unmuted. Pardon me.
Okay.
So we had been working with Dr. Gohagan and Director Donnet, Director Carney, to end up to put a proposal to the committees and the board to ask for a block of funding to be able to allow Linda to pull from with the approval of the executive director once the board establishes that block of funding, to allow her to assist the executive director as well as Dr. Gohagan in these HR functions. And so, Dr. Gohagan, can you recall some of those numbers? I don't have those in front of me. Could you help me out with that, please?
Yes, sir. The total block of funding was $25,000, and we recommended the hourly rate of $250 an hour, not to exceed the $25,000 without board approval. The $250 hourly rate is in line with what we pay other consultants with the district.
And that $25,000, that's the standard issue block of funding that Hamilton County government also does as well, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, so we would put that before the, is this an executive committee or personnel committee?
This is the personnel committee reporting to the executive committee.
Yeah, very good. So we would ask the executive committee approve this and send it to the full board to allow us to to allow the executive director to have a $25,000 block of funding that he can pull from to pay Linda as she does her work with our agency.
Ted, thank you. That's a motion. Can I get a second from someone on the executive committee?
Eddie, I'll second that. And I wanted to ask, Mr. Chair, is this, it's not a time frame sensitive, like annually or nothing. It's just $250 an hour as And then once we reach the 25,000, we come back and renew it if the board wishes.
Correct.
That is correct. The statement of work, though, includes, I just wanted to make sure people were aware that she's going to be addressing certain items from the employee survey recommendations. I was concerned that all those recommended items from the employee survey that she did, someone has to be there working with Dr. Gohagan and the staff to implement that and give the board a progress on how well we're doing with that and engaging in our employees. And making, this is what Ted talked about, making the recommendation on the district's compensation study and pay plan. I do know her, and that's right in her wheelhouse. She's a lot of experience with compensation planning and general human resources responsibilities. That's kind of a catch-all phrase, but I did ask her to work with Dr. Gohagan to look at district policies and practices, making sure that we're using best practices in certain things. So I think that's a good statement of work, and I really do appreciate Ted and the staff, Dr. Gohagan and Jeff, for working through that process. So those are my comments. You have a recommendation to approve.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Am I hearing that this is not limited to a time frame? I thought it's not for a year. I mean, 25,000 could be, 3 months and then another 25. And if so, that's fine. But then my next question becomes, I'm assuming then that this is professional services that do not have to go through any process.
Correct.
And Mike is on the call too. Mike, man, we assume, Mike, unmute if you would. He's working on it. There he is.
There you go.
It's
Yes,
a
sir.
professional services contract, correct?
Yes.
And did you also say, Ted or Jeff, that this is how the county does it, that they just do this block of hours and then up to 25,000, and then they relook at it to, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
County's
correct.
doing it.
Yeah, we're approved, what we would be asking the committee to do and send to the full board is approve a $25,000 block of funding that doesn't have a time limit, that when she works, she will notify the executive director that, okay, I worked 7 hours this week, I worked 5 hours that week, and she draws down that block of funding over a period of time. And then when we approach $25,000, we go back to the board if necessary, or when necessary, to ask for the additional funding after looking at the budget availability, of course.
The only proviso I will add to that is a requirement for Dr. Gohagan to aggregate a report that goes to the chair of the personnel committee, who will keep the board engaged and informed.
Yes,
Sure.
sir.
Okay, Daisy, we answer your question
Yes.
sufficiently. All right, roll call, please. I think we had a motion and a second, did we not?
Yes.
Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Chief Phillips.
Yes.
Daisy Madison,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
Chairman Brown.
Yes, we'll get that matter. Thank you to the full board. The last item we had was a review of the updated executive director job description. Dr. Gohagan has been sending that out to all of you, soliciting your comments, and she presented her modifications to that document. So you should have that before you. And you, Angel, if you would put that on the screen for us.
Yes, sir. Let's see if I can share my screen.
Okay. This is important as we try to solidify the process and move that forward.
Okay. Hopefully you're seeing that. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger. This is after consulting with members of the board of directors, Linda Herrig, downtown human resources, and myself and Director Donick. This is the finalized version of the revised executive director job description. We note a little bit different from most Hampton County job descriptions. There's a philosophy statement at the very beginning that talks about the structure of 911 districts and the responsibilities of the board of directors and how they plan to live up to that. And by that, appointing of an executive director is how they do that. So you should all have this. I'm not going to obviously read to you word for word, but there's some changes that we added in there. We expanded the definition of the position itself to include some more information about the executive director's conversations with the board of directors. We also added some additional tasks in there and cleaned up some of the language that was in there before. But feel free to go through there. If there are any questions I can answer specifically, I'm glad to do that.
I know Vice Chair Eddie Phillips had sent in, and I reviewed those several recommendations on board and executive director relationship and this whole notion of governance oversight. And I see some of that language there. I'll just yield back to Eddie to make sure that we capture the essence of what he was thinking in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Dr. Cohagen, some of the things, what we had tried to do, since this is kind of a historic time, you know, we're changing to an executive director. We've done this employee study, and it's kind of a new day at Hamilton County 911. We wanted to, since we were having to update this executive director job description that we hadn't done in years, we wanted to capture the way we were really doing business. And so for any executive director coming in, they would understand, you know, what's going on. And I'm speaking specifically to their relationship to the board of directors and their responsibility to keep the board of directors informed on things that are going on. And we're already seeing a great change. I mean, Jeff's doing a great job at this. So this is nothing about Jeff. This is, you know, we had just added a little more specific stuff. Like I had asked that the executive director informs the board of directors on all issues and operations as specified, work specifically with the board chairman and the executive committee in those periods in between regular board meetings, oversees the preparation of agendas and related materials, and which we had never, that's what John has always done, but we had never captured it. And for all board of director meetings and committee meetings, but all that, it just seems, Angel, like it's gotten watered down. It just has a sentence here or there saying, you know, has a strong relations with the board of directors. And I guess we were wanting to make sure in writing that the executive director and the board of directors understood that there was that relationship and that the executive director needed to report back. He also needed to keep the chairman informed in those times in between meetings, because that's just the way we do business. And we had gotten away from that, quite frankly. And but we're not away from it now. Jeff's doing that. We just kind of wanted to capture it in writing for, you know, after Jeff retires in about 20 years and we're hiring a new guy, he needs to understand what we're asking for there. So I guess, I know I'm kind of rambling, but there's that. There's another area where it talks about the executive director develops and administers the policies and all. We had added with board approval because, as you'll know, the executive director, he's charged with developing and implementing our SOPs and things, our policies of the district, but he has to do that with board approval. We remember we got in trouble over the hair issue, and that's when we had all these politicians saying, where's the board of directors? You know, they're the ones that are responsible for this, and we didn't know what was going on. So that's when the board changed the policy that the executive director and the chairman signed off on it on these new policies and things. So anyway, I just seemed like that kind of, you know, it got changed into kind of flowing words. It looks good, but I want to make sure we're catching what we wanted to catch. some of these things, if the board was happy with this, some of this could be addressed in like a written directive from the board of directors to the executive director on how to do business day to day. You know what I mean? We could do it that way if we felt like this was okay. I'm sorry to be rambling, but that's the only things I was seeing. And then also over under minimum qualifications, where it talks about a minimum of a equivalent of a master's degree or whatever. We had asked that it say in there as determined by the board of directors, because if we don't hire someone that has these, or we don't think they have the equivalent, or they think they have the equivalent and we don't, at the end of the day, it's the board of directors that has to make that determination, what we're gonna accept, because we're the ones that are hiring this person. And so I'm wanting to show that where there is oversight and that we are working as a team, but we do not want to micromanage our executive director, but we want to capture doing business the way we're now doing business with Jeff. We kind of got ourselves in, we had some issues in the past. We're not having them now, but that's the reason that we were wanting to, while we were updating it, stick that stuff in here. Does that make any sense at all?
It does, Eddie. Myself and Angel and Linda looked at all of those things. We felt that we have captured all of that in there. I don't really know of a nice way to say this, but we don't need to have the concerns we had with John inserted into the job description for any new director going forward. I don't think we're going to have those same issues. And you said it best, Eddie. We're not having those issues now, and we should not have those issues in the future. That's not a job description issue. That's a supervision issue, which we as a board of directors can address. That's not a job description thing. That's a supervision thing, which is we can adequately address that. I will, you mentioned something in minimum qualifications. Angel, it's my understanding this may be an oversight on our part, but we did discuss on minimum qualifications that was determined by the board. That's a good point that Eddie brought up. So where it says virtual services which must be advanced, pardon me as I skim through this, or an equivalent combination of education, training, and experience which provides relevant knowledge and determined for this position as determined by the board of directors. I thought we did put that in there. It's probably just an oversight that's not in there. I would recommend that we add that back in. It is the board of directors that determines that, not the candidate. That's an assumption, but that's an assumption we probably ought to remove any and all doubt.
Yeah.
With
And
regard,
that's a great catch, and thanks for that recommendation to modify that. That's clearly now states what we would expect, and that the board would make that final decision. So we appreciate that. I am very, very pleased with what you have done with this statement right now. I think it begins to clearly state that the board, that we work in shared governance and partnership with the executive director that we select.
correct.
And that by law, they expect the board to have full oversight
Yes.
of the work at the end of the day and making those recommendations. I think that's there, but I think as we select candidates, we can have those kind of conversations going forward. And I would expect the personnel committee to put together goals and objectives annually for the person selected, so they fully understand their relationships with the board. Again, we want to select an individual who is quite competent and that we don't have to micromanage, but they can implement the recommendations of the board. And our role is there to support and guide, but also our role is governance and to review policy and make sure that we understand and approve those policy changes going forward as well. So I'm excited about that with those changes. Eddie, I think that what I would say is that have Dr. Gohagan send this preliminary final draft out to all the board members.
Wait a minute, doctor. I've been waiting on a minute to jump in.
Okay, I didn't see you, Daisy. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just waiting. I mean, I just didn't want to interrupt.
No, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to make sure that Dr. Gohagan or somebody considered the comments that I put out there. I wasn't sure if you all saw them, but I know we talked before I left for vacation. I shared with her a Word document, not a Word document, but a Google document. That-
Yes, I did get those and those were incorporated in there.
Okay, I don't remember what they were now, but it was some, from my perspective, the thing of it that I don't see here is the assurance that they are to implement the policies and to keep the board informed of items or information. It's just a matter, and I think it says strong relationship. You know, I'm not sure what a strong relationship is, but it talks about the individual having a strong relationship with the board of directors. Is that what I saw?
Yes, Daisy, and also on the current page that we're looking at on the screen, where paragraph from the bottom up, second paragraph from the bottom up says responsible for providing that and for implementing the visions and policies. It is covered in there like you wanted it.
That one is, yes, it is, but and the other one is just to make sure that they keep the board informed, and that would be the board chair, because he's not supposed to keep the board. It's not his job to keep the board, to work with 9 different people. How many people on that board?
11.
11 people, you know, every month. But the board chair needs to be informed before stuff shows up on the agenda.
Yeah. Thanks, Daisy. Great comments. I would like to kind of add, though, that Jeff has done a marvelous job at doing that. I mean, he contacts me on a lot of things at the end of the day. Some of it is just FYI, did you know? And I'm really appreciative of that. Whomever sits in the chairman's seat would be very appreciative of that. So you're not caught off or caught by surprise on anything. Even media inquiries, he'll call and say, hey, did you know?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I can't tell that that is addressed, except that a strong relationship I saw somewhere. And because, I mean, yeah,
It's in there.
okay, where is it? Oh, I mean, really,
I know, I agree with you, Daisy. I had asked the same thing, but it just seems watered down, but I take their word for it that it's not. Because like you say, I think we can at any time give a written directive to the director, do this, you know, operate this way, give us this information at this time, but we shouldn't have to even do that. It may be there on this page. It says in the first paragraph, works in concert with the board of directors and members of the executive. Is that what it's?
well,
Yes.
You,
no,
Angel,
but
you
he's not
moved
gonna
it.
do that. Yeah, he's not gonna do that. That's too much to ask.
Yeah.
Or yeah, he's not, I mean, I'm just thinking the board of the chair, because he's not gonna go over the agenda. And that's really what I'm sort of headed at, because I'd say for his council meetings, there's nothing on the council meeting agenda that is not discussed with the chair before it ends up in public meeting on the agenda.
Right.
And so that's the kind of thing I'm after, have that strong relationship between him and the chair, her and the chair, whoever. And by the way, we keep saying, Jeff, we having to make sure that Jeff knows this isn't personal. Jeff, you do recognize that. We are totally happy with you. But we're just talking general stuff right now. But
Well, as I said,
So Ted, right after definitions, in that paragraph on definitions where you got strong relation with the board of directors, comma, and you just may want to add and keeping the chairman of the board informed of critical issues involving 911 district operations, something like that. That kind of language would kind of capture that.
and
What's being done now?
well, what is on the agenda? Because what is going to be discussed, I mean, you need them by the agenda, but most of the things that are of any issue is going to be on the agenda. Because we can't talk about stuff otherwise.
Right.
So any agenda item needs to be who is it? The board chair needs to be informed before it's actually placed on the agenda.
It's my understanding that's being done anyway. I want to
Oh, I
go
don't,
back.
there again, I understand that. It's just a matter of putting it in writing and whether or not I don't think that's too much. Or you say it in a different way, but that's all I would have to say. I mean-
Jeff certainly is performing at that level, but we have to write this assuming that one day Jeff may not be there. We may be looking at someone totally new. And this has to inform that person about how this works.
And it could be that Jeff likes working with Richard, but when I get to be chair, he may decide he doesn't want to talk to me.
If I can work with Eddie Phillips, Ms. Mass.
No, but seriously, that's what I wanted to say. It is totally not about Jeff. Jeff is,
Yeah.
we're totally happy with Jeff.
Well, maybe, yeah, I agree with you, because I had put something in there about agenda too, but it didn't make the cut. So, but maybe it could be something like develops, with the board chair approval of develops agenda items for all, for board and committee meetings or something. I don't know.
So Ted, could we count on you to kind of capture that thought and inject that in?
I'd rather we do it during this meeting.
Okay.
That way we know what we're sending to the full board. I would like to go back to something I said earlier. The job description is not the supervision of an employee.
No.
The board and or chairman or chair of committees, whatever, we're responsible for supervising the executive director, not the job description. All of the points that you have talked about are in this job description. If we have a communication issue with the executive director, then that's incumbent upon us as supervisors to bring that and correct that and or provide corrective measures. It's not the job description's job to do that. That's where I'm coming from. That's what we discussed with Linda. That's what we discussed with Angel. Angel, am I off base on that, or was the spirit of what we discussed?
No, sir, you are correct. That's what we discussed.
So I think, Eddie used the term watered down. I do understand where he's coming from on that. All of the issues that were submitted for consideration, they've been incorporated into this job description. And it even talks about communication. And if we want to firm some things up, like briefs to chairman and things like that, let's go ahead and put that in. But that's not this document's job to supervise the executive director. And no one said that, but we want to ensure that that's not where we're going. It's our job to do that. And I think we can do that. And I mentioned earlier under the comment of there's no good way to say it, we don't need to drag the concerns we had with John into the job description. That's not the place for it. The place for it is to supervise the person.
I hear you, totally agree with you, but I don't think that this is trying to supervise. I think this is trying to set some level of expectation. And then that level of expectation will be part of the supervision and evaluations. But that's all. But now you said there was something in there about communications. It may be in there. Where is that about communication?
Under definition, staffing and hiring all communications from web presence, internal, external communication.
No, there's another area. Go down to task. I think it's there.
Well, I didn't finish reading that one.
Works in concert with the board of directors and members of the executive leadership team to foster a cohesive communication environment. I think
that's correct. That's where it is.
Okay.
And that, you see, and that's not what I sent down, because I don't even know what half those words mean.
Well, I think we're kind of, as they say, twirling at windmills here, because I think the broad language does capture that.
Right.
And it's incumbent upon us to define what we will want this person to do, how that relationship would work in their goals and objectives annually.
Right. And that's what I was thinking earlier. I mean, if we ever have an issue, we can do a written directive from the board to the executive director saying, do business this way. I agree with you there.
I think that sentence right there it satisfies me enough.
Yeah, it satisfies me as well.
I think that I agree. I think if we can make sure we go back and capture what Ted said there, that they'd accidentally left off the part about, with, the board determines under the qualifications. I think that's the only, everything else we can live with, and I think we're good with it. If Daisy's good and it sounds like Chair's good, then I'll make the motion that we send this to the full board with the changes that Ted and them have identified.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you. All right. Again, I want to thank all of you for your input, the entire board for your input there. We're again trying not to micromanage anyone, but it is our responsibility to govern this work and to make sure that we work collaboratively with the executive director and that there's a good flow of information between us. Right? That is the expectation, even under the law, as I read the 911 law. So I want to thank all of you for that. Mike, also thank you for looking this over to your legal eye. Let's go ahead and do a roll call, please.
Chief Phillips,
Yes.
Daisy Madison,
Yes.
Ted Rogers,
Yes.
Chairman Brown.
Yes.
And thank you for not putting all of Daisy's stuff in there word for word and leaving all mine out, I mean,
I'm not good. He didn't, the chair didn't even acknowledge the fact that I sent it in. I'm glad Copenhagen got it, Doctor. Thank you.
Again, I think Eddie's point's well taken about not bringing in issues of a former situation into this new going forward. We want to be very, very positive and open and making sure that we've got strong communication with our executive director. Jeff keeps me informed on just about everything. He will, even from media inquiries and things like that. It's really good. I feel very comfortable with where we are. All right, anything else to come before the board?
Yes, Chair, there is one other little item that's
Okay.
stuck in there with personnel. It's on that cybersecurity position.
Okay, all right.
That may be, I guess that's a technology thing, so I'll give it to Seth to.
Okay. Yeah, I have that job description. Go ahead, Seth. Unmute, please.
I think it'd probably actually be for Dr. Gohagan.
Oh, okay. And then technically it's this is a job that we've already, so I'm gonna. give
The
it
job
over to
description's
Ted.
already been written. It's just a request to change the pay grade.
Okay, well, Chair, I'm gonna turn this back over to Ted then. As personnel.
Ted, if you'd go ahead and report, this is a system security specialist. I have the job description in front of me. Go ahead, Ted.
Yes, and pardon me, but I'm punting back to Angel.
All right.
And that concludes our meeting. We had a good-
You notice I went ahead and unmuted while you were talking. Director Graham came to me, I don't know, about a month or so ago, talking about or wanting to redo the system security pay grade. One of the problems that we had initially after we created that system was that it was linked with the systems and network specialist position at the same pay grade. We put that out there. We had applicants to come through there. We couldn't find anybody that could fill that position, partly because of the pay grade being as low as it was, this being a tech position. So I looked at it along with Director Graham, and we got with Vince Yermal, who handles this stuff for the county. And we looked at the pay grade, and we decided to disaggregate the system security specialist from the network and system specialist, two very different positions, and decided to try to upgrade that salary pay grade to range 70, which is a minimum of 67.3 up to $100,000. So that is where we are now. We do believe that by changing that pay grade, we'll get a better quality of candidate. And hopefully be able to fill that position at this point.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gohagan.
Yes,
Any other comments from Ted? I assume that as chair personnel, you are supportive of this.
Yes, they reviewed it with me, and based upon their data, I did support it.
Will you make that a recommendation?
Yes, sir. So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I have a question first.
Go ahead, Daisy.
I assume, Dr. Cohagen, and that means I'm sure there is no conflict in changing this grade and the parity between these positions and existing positions. This-
No, ma'am, no, ma'am, it does not.
You wouldn't have proposed it if it was.
No, ma'am.
Also, Angel or Dr. Cohagen, what, and this may be a Jeff question too. We've kind of changed our philosophy. You know, at one time we advertised for this position and we didn't get a good results, and it's probably because of the pay. So then we decided we were going to pay outside firms to do it. And then in the meantime, I think we maybe identified somebody who was interested in it, but we also realized that we probably do need a full-time person monitoring this, as well as backup from these companies that do it 24/7, because we can't pay somebody to be in our center 24/7. But is that right? I mean, tell us briefly, Jeff, our cybersecurity, if you can do it gently without revealing anything, tell us our philosophy going forward for the board.
I believe our intent at this point is to attempt to fill it in-house. And then just because of as you said, the size and complexity of our operation and the stuff involved in it, that we'll also have a monitoring firm backing them up.
And you guys feel like this adjustment in salary will be sufficient to attract the quality people we need?
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Eddie. Any further comments? Did we get a second on this one?
Yes, Ms. Madison seconded.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, let's do a roll call, Jeff.
Okay, this will be for the Personnel Committee.
That is correct.
Chris Adams,
Yes.
Richard Brown,
Yes.
Chief Phillips,
Yes,
Brad Tucker,
you're muted, Brad.
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right.
John Miller,
Yes.
John's on.
Ted Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, well, listen, it's been a healthy hour and 36 minutes. And we've covered a lot. And I really do appreciate your patience and all your input. We're excited about getting our board meeting together and making sure that we can move these things forward to support an outstanding operation. Jeff, thank you and your team for all the background information, for your continuing good work. We appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Be nothing further, we will stand adjourned.
Listen, I want to say, Jeff, one of your windows in there is bulletproof, but we're not going to tell you which one.
I think John turned around when the meeting turned around there. So I'm good.
All right, see you later.
See ya.